Hey guys, welcome to Cold Blood Creations. So in this video, we're going to be teaching you how to set up a bearded dragon cage before you bring your bearded dragon home.
So whether you want to call your dragon's new home a cage, a tank, a terrarium, whatever you want to use to describe it, it needs to be something that the dragon is going to be comfortable and feel secure in. Now, one of the cages that we most recommend are the all glass cages with the sliding screen tops. Those can be found in pet stores all over the place. You can buy them at reptile shops. You can even find them used sometimes on Craigslist and some of the Facebook groups. However, we would advise that if you buy a used tank before you bring it home and start setting it up, that you thoroughly disinfect any used caging prior to preparing it for a home for your dragon. When it comes to choosing the correct size cage for your dragon, there's a lot of varying opinions, and one of the most common opinions is that you should start your dragon off in a 10-gallon aquarium and then move up in size as your dragon grows. Now, we don't hold that opinion. As a matter of fact, I personally feel like a 10-gallon aquarium is not a good selection for a dragon at any age. Bearded dragons, when they're full grown, they're going to need something roughly larger than a 55-gallon aquarium. As a matter of fact, here at Cold Blood Creations, all of our adult dragons are kept in 110-gallon tanks. Now, certainly you're probably not going to start your baby dragon off in 110 gallon. However, we would discourage you from starting off in something small like a 10-gallon aquarium. Now, the thought process of most people is that, well, the dragon needs something small because it's a tiny baby dragon and it wants to feel secure. But I want to remind you that bearded dragons in the wild don't live in 10-gallon aquariums. They live in huge spaces out in nature. Therefore, in captivity, if you want to go small, the smallest that we personally recommend is a 40-gallon tank. One of the reasons why we recommend the 40-gallon tank is because it allows you enough space to create a sufficient temperature gradient within the cage. A smaller cage is going to heat up much quicker in an overall area. However, something larger like a 40-gallon will give you a heat gradient of a warm or a hot basking spot, but it also gives you enough space that there's cooler areas in your dragon's cage so that they can thermoregulate their body temperature as needed. For this video demonstration, we're going to use a 40-gallon breeder tank. Now, one of the first things that we recommend for any reptile is some type of background. Now, this background in the cage is going to serve two purposes. Number one, it looks nice and it creates a natural looking environment in the background. The thing that it does for your dragon, though, is it allows him to not have glass on all four sides. Now, we personally believe that that causes the animal to feel a little more secure when they don't have this clear area all the way around them. And for that reason, we also like to black out both of the sides. We just use some black craft paint. It only allows the front glass, or the side that you want to view your dragon from, to be clear and provide your animal with a little extra security.
Now we're going to talk about humidity. Humidity is very important for bearded dragons, and we recommend keeping your humidity from 30 to 40%. That's all they need. Now, a lot of people have questions about water bowls inside the cage because of how much humidity it will raise. So we don't recommend it where we live because we live in Georgia and it's very, very humid down here. So our indoor humidity right now is actually 66%. That's inside with the air conditioner on. So we don't keep bowls inside our cage because it will raise the humidity to over 40%. But if you live somewhere on the West Coast, we get comments all the time like, I live in California, can I keep a bowl in my cage? Now, if it keeps your humidity up to 30 to 40%, that's okay. But if it's over that, then you don't want to use a bowl. A lot of people wonder, well, how am I going to know if that's over or under? Well, you can use these right here. These are from Varium Electronics. This video is not sponsored, but we will have these linked in the description box below. These little guys will track your humidity and the temperature of your cage. They work great, so they're in the description box for those of you who like to purchase one of these.
We have now entered the most controversial subject of this entire video, bearded dragon substrate.
All right, so if there's one subject that's going to create fighting, tension, controversy, nasty comments in the comment section of any YouTube video, it's going to be on the substrate of bearded dragons. It is a hotly debated topic among bearded dragon enthusiasts, but we're going to deal with it nonetheless. Now, there are basically two different types of dragon keepers. There are those who are the more naturalistic, meaning they want their cage to look like a bearded dragon's environment would look like in his natural environment. Therefore, they want to use some type of substrate that's going to give the appearance of the dragon being in nature. There is another type of dragon keeper that pretty much don't care about the physical appearance of the cage, because they're the type that want to take their dragon out of the cage and interact with it more like a pet, and therefore the physical appearance of the cage is not quite as important to them. One substrate that people use, and we actually use it here, especially during the breeding season, is just plain white newsprint. Now, this stuff is relatively inexpensive. In fact, if you have a newspaper printing place in your area, sometimes you can go to those places and they will give you for free rolls of newsprint. Now, you want to use the newsprint that doesn't have the ink on them. You don't want to take the chance of soiled paper or getting ink all over your dragon's belly. That being said, there are some pros and cons to using newspaper. First of all, we'll talk about the positive parts of paper. It's easy to get it. I mean, you can buy this stuff at big box stores and things like that, so it's relatively easy to acquire. The other thing is it allows you to visually see when the cage needs to be cleaned. Because of the color of the paper, as soon as your dragon poops, you can visually assess that, yep, the substrate needs to be replaced. Basically, you just fold it up, throw it in the trash, cut you a new piece, and replace it. Now, the cons to that are that it doesn't look very natural. Also, it doesn't allow your dragon to do any type of digging. That's something that people talk about that's all important, is giving your dragon the ability to dig. However, here at Cold Blood Creations, one thing that I've noticed is that our dragons never dig. We never have our dragons digging unless it's a female digging a nest to lay her eggs. Apart from that, we just don't believe that digging is as much a natural behavior for bearded dragons as some people would assume it is. Therefore, if you want to use the newspaper for the quick, easy convenience of cleaning up, then certainly this is a substrate that we do recommend. Okay, so we get a lot of questions about carpet. Should I use carpet as a substrate in our dragon cage? Now, I'm going to once again give you my personal opinion from all the years I've been working with dragons. My opinion is I would never use carpet as a substrate for a couple of reasons. Number one, your dragon is going to urinate, and carpet is just going to soak down into that carpet, creating a stinking, wet, bacteria-infested, ammonia-smelling environment. And you can't easily see when the carpet has been soiled. And the other problem that I've seen with people who use carpet is that, remember, bearded dragons have claws. The little fibers on most carpets, the dragons can get their claws in, and sometimes they get their claws hung up in there. We've even heard cases, never seen it personally, but I've heard cases of those little fibers getting wrapped around a dragon's toes and them not being able to get off, and they end up self-amputating their toes. So for that reason, I personally do not recommend carpet as a cage substrate. For you more natural type that want to keep your dragon in more natural looking environments, there is several substrates out there that will allow you to do that. Now, it's a very controversial subject of whether or not to keep your dragons on sand. Some companies have come out and said, well, we have a sand that's safe for bearded dragons, while other people say no sand is safe for bearded dragons. One substrate that we do use with our females during the egg laying season is simply a hard packed dirt. Not a loose sand substrate, but more like a potting soil, and we pack it tightly. That allows our dragons to dig holes, to deposit their eggs, and to cover them back up. So if you want to use a soil, we don't recommend the use of sand per se, simply because we've just never really used it. There's been a lot of controversy about it, so it's something we've kind of stayed away from. However, we have used dirt successfully. Once again, you want to keep it kind of hard packed. Also, when it comes time to clean your cage, you want to visually assess that dirt and make sure that you get all of it out. We do recommend replacing the dirt in your cage at least once a month. And if you're going to collect dirt from outside, we also recommend that you put that dirt in an oven heated up to 200 degrees for about 30 minutes to kill off any bad bacteria or anything that would be found in that soil. Make sure there's no fertilizers, no pesticides, or anything like that present in the soil, and then certainly you can use that. All right, so one other question we get is, what about the products that are marketed toward bearded dragon owners, like the ground walnut shells? Now, I'm not going to show the particular brand of this. We're not sponsoring it. We're certainly not trying to hurt no one's business. However, again, my personal opinion is that I would not use this stuff. Even though it does look kind of like natural desert sand, I still wouldn't recommend the use of it, simply because there is a risk of impaction. However, I don't feel like it's probably as large of a risk as some people believe it is. The risk still remains, therefore we do avoid it. However, I understand that watching this video, there's still going to be some people out there that they're going to say stuff like, well, bearded dragons live on sand in the wild, why can't we use sand in captivity? Let me just give you this piece of advice. For those of you who absolutely insist that you are going to use sand, there's two things that I would recommend if you are going to use it. Number one, you never feed insects or salads in the same enclosure. You want to remove your dragon to an enclosure that doesn't have any ground walnut shells or any sand and feed them in that. Therefore, they're not picking up particles of sand in their mouth when they're lunging to grab their insects. The second thing I'm going to recommend to you is simply this. Be careful that your bearded dragon is not getting sand in and around their eyes. It can cause horrible eye infections, and you want to make sure that you inspect your dragon's eyes regularly and make sure that that's not taking place.
So next we're going to talk about hide boxes. We get a lot of questions about hide boxes, and we do recommend them because in the wild, bearded dragons have a lot of predators. Now in captivity, there may not be any predators, but dragons don't necessarily know the difference between their natural predators and maybe your dog and your cat, or maybe even you. You know, if you don't brush your hair, brush your teeth.
Oh God.
You might want to cut that. So as far as what hide box do you want to use, it's kind of up to you on whether you want your cage to look more natural or if you just want to set it up with a bunch of DIYs. It's up to you. So if you want something more natural, you can use rock caves or wood, and if you want something that's more of a DIY, you can even use a plastic bowl, or you can even use an empty cereal box, as long as your bearded dragon can feel secure and the hide box is big enough to cover the whole dragon. So if you're bringing home a baby, a lot of times babies can feel kind of stressed in their new environment. So what we do is we take the hide box and we flip it over backwards so that it's not facing the clear side and it won't see anything that might spook them, and they feel more secure that way.
Now, one thing we also recommend inside the bearded dragon's cage is something for them to climb on. Climbing is one of the natural behaviors that bearded dragons do appreciate the ability to do, and therefore we do recommend multiple climbing areas. Now, this can be anything from the sandblasted grapevine that is commercially available, or you could find some nice pieces of driftwood if you live near a river. Once again, we would remind you that if you're going to use wild collected driftwood, we do recommend placing it in an oven at about 200 degrees. Keep it in there for about 30 minutes. That'll kill off any bacteria or any thing that could potentially harm your dragon. And then also to secure it in the cage. Now, a couple of things you can use to secure wood is silicone. You can silicone your wood to the sides of the cage, or you could just stack it in such a way that it's not easy to top over. So finally, bearded dragons are going to need lighting. Now, we get a lot of questions asking what we recommend for lighting. Now, there's basically two types of lights that we believe our bearded dragons are going to need. Number one, you're going to need a basking light. This is a light that's going to generate enough heat to create a warm spot for your dragon to bask and to raise their body temperature so that they have the ability to digest their food. Now, you will oftentimes find your bearded dragon sitting up on a climbing branch immediately underneath a basking light. and they're thermoregulating. Now sometimes you'll see your bearded dragon sitting under a light. He'll have his mouth open, and that's not a bad thing. The bearded dragon is simply using that as a basking platform. Now, the other light that we want to recommend is a UVB light. That is a light that's going to create vitamin D3. They're usually not the same thing, although there are now commercially available some light bulbs that produce heat as well as UVB. Now, we have never used them, but I don't want to dissuade you from using those. You can do a search on Google or something and find bulbs that create both a basking spot and UVB in the same light bulb. However, there's a couple commercially available units that give you the option of putting 2 light bulbs into the same unit. We recommend one of those being a light bulb with enough wattage to sufficiently heat your basking spots, and the other one we would recommend the use of a UVB light. Now, UVB lights also come in tubes that you can use if you want to go that way. You can have one basking dome, and then you can have a tube for UVB. But either way it goes, you want the ability, whether you use 1 bulb or 2, you want the ability to both heat your dragon and to produce UVB in order for your dragon to produce vitamin D3. Now, we get a lot of questions about nighttime lighting. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I have never used nighttime heat for bearded dragons. Our dragons go down at night to room temperature, which in our facility usually stays around 75 degrees. Now, that is not too cool for bearded dragons. In fact, bearded dragons can tolerate temperatures even cooler than that for short periods of time. Now, if you want to use nighttime heat, that's okay, but we have found that we have never needed to use it. In the desert, the daytime temperatures are extremely hot, but it does dip down pretty cool in the desert. Therefore, we've thought that the use of a nighttime red bulb or a blue bulb to heat our cage to just be a waste of space and a waste of money. So we promised in our last video that we would take questions from you, our viewers, and highlight them in this video. We're going to do that now. Our first question comes from Benjamin Mason. Benjamin says, how do I get my young bearded dragon to eat vegetables? She doesn't really eat from my hand, and sometimes she'll only eat vegetables if I sneak one by her while she's basking with her mouth open. Now, this is a common problem that we get asked about quite a bit. Now, first of all, you want to make sure that when you're purchasing a dragon that you buy one from someone who has already introduced vegetables into the diet. Now, because it's easy, because it's time consuming, a lot of people out there will just feed baby dragons crickets and worms and whatnot. But we start our dragons off eating vegetables along with insects. That way we don't create a problem for you, our purchaser, down the road. But since you've already got a dragon who only wants to eat meat, then what you're going to have to do is retrain this bad behavior. Now, when I was a kid, the way our parents raised us was simply this. You either eat what we put in front of you or you go to bed hungry. Now, because they wanted what was best for us in terms of our nutrition and health. The same rule applies with bearded dragons. Sometimes bearded dragons will be extremely stubborn and they will refuse to eat vegetables in the hopes that you're going to provide them with the one thing they want, that being the insects. So what we're going to have to do is retrain the dragon. We're going to withhold insects for a couple of days. We're going to begin with about 2 to 3 days. Don't feed your dragon anything at all. And then offer them vegetables. Once they become hungry enough to eat whatever you place in front of them, they will begin to eat those vegetables. Now, if they don't do it on the 2nd or the 3rd day, simply remove the vegetables. Don't feed them insects. Let them continue to fast. It's not going to hurt your bearded dragon if you let them fast, even for up to a week. You're going to create more health problems down the road if you continue to feed them an all-protein diet. So we want to do what's necessary. Even though some of you may think it's cruel, we want to fast your dragon long enough that they begin to eat their vegetables, and then and only then reintroduce protein back into their diet. Now, once you get them to eat the vegetables, I want to give you a little trick that we use here at Cold Blood Creations. We never feed insects in the morning. We always feed the vegetables first thing in the morning when our dragons are just waking up, they're heating up, and they're hungry. We get them to eat their vegetables, and then in the afternoon we offer them the insects. That way they don't get into the habit of wanting the protein, wanting the insects, and ignoring the vegetables. When the early morning comes and they're hungry, vegetables first, later in the day, the insects and the protein, and that's what's worked for us here over the years.
Okay, so this next comment is actually from Instagram, and it is from mcollins07, and she said, Cold Blood Creations, can their cage be set up by a window that gets sunlight? We're in Southern California. So thank you for your comment, but we actually don't recommend keeping dragon cages next to a window, and for two reasons. People think that dragons are getting sunlight, but oftentimes this is false. Well, it is false, because the windows can often filter out the UVB rays, so they're not actually getting any benefit from the sunlight. And two, it just makes the cages very, very hot, plus the basking light that they already have on their cage, so we recommend keeping your dragons away from the windows. This next question is from Zariah, and it says, how much should I hold my dragon? So when you bring your dragon home, you're going to want it to get used to its new environment. So we would recommend giving it a couple, 2 or 3 days without handling, just let them get used to its new cage, and then let your interaction with your dragon increase.
Okay, this next one is not really a question, it's a comment, but we want to talk about this just the same. This is from Dan Humphreys. He says, I'm impressed that your daughter has the knowledge and the confidence to participate in your videos. YouTube is a vicious, brutal jungle. I hope she gets nothing but support for sharing her experiences. Now, Dan brought up a very true point, and that is the fact that social media can be very, very brutal. Now, that is one of the reasons why we created this Cold Blood Creations channel, is because we wanted to give people a resource to come to learn more about animals in a non-judgmental environment. Those of you guys who are familiar with the reptile groups on Facebook will know that many of those groups can be absolutely brutal, especially to new keepers who come on there to ask questions. They ask a legitimate question and then oftentimes they get attacked for it. Now, we are not going to allow that on this channel. If we see that going on down in the comments, we will delete those comments, and if you continue to do it, we will block you. There is no reason for the reptile community to be nasty, to be mean, to be hateful to one another. We all love the same animals, we all love the same hobby, and you're not benefiting anything for yourself to treat people in such a manner. None of us grew up or were born having all of this knowledge. We had to learn it from someone who was kind enough and patient enough to teach us. Therefore, we should share our knowledge with people and not be hateful or belittle them in that type of thing. If you see what I'm talking about in the Facebook groups, be a voice for positive change. Be a voice for encouraging and teaching, not a voice for criticism and hateful comments. So guys, once again, we want to thank you so much for supporting us here at Cold Blood Creations. We appreciate you watching this video.
And if you liked it, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe down below. Also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Instagram, and we will see you guys in our next video. Bye. You starting or am I starting?
Oh.
You never said
we forget our
roles.
Get him?
Oh, there.
Smack him again to make sure he's dead.
Hold on, I got hair in my nose.
That hair grew out of her nose.
Did that sound stupid?